Welcome back to Extra Literary Affairs, a podcast for the lit curious reader, because why not read a little of everything? I'm Joey Kelly.
And I'm Jennifer Smith.
And today, instead of discussing literature, we're going to discuss things about literature. So we're going to focus on the broader idea of what literature is and how it's being shaped. So we have two topics that I think we're going to discuss today. The younger generations are reading more classics, it seems like. I'm curious as to, if we go down a list of a few of the most popular ones, why we think they're reading them, what they could gain from reading classics, and give some recommendations for people who are younger that would like to read classics. Maybe they've already read these, or maybe they don't find these appealing and they want something else to read. All right. Any opening thoughts on that before I tell you what books? So what do you think would be on this list?
What do I think is on the list? I believe that young people are probably interested in reading probably all the Jane Austen stuff, getting a little Bridgerton vibes for that. Probably the Odyssey, since that is coming up. I think Wuthering Heights. Do you see a theme that I'm going for, Joey? I think young people are reading things that may be showing up in popular culture and maybe not the things that we would necessarily have pointed to for the classics.
I mean,
independently of that.
I would certainly, Jane Austen and the Odyssey, I would definitely say that. But those were like mentioned once on the list, but they weren't repeated. So the ones that I found that were repeated on many lists were The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, 1984 by George Orwell, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. And then the ones that I added, because I see them all over social media, are East of Eden by John Steinbeck, The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, and then Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Couldn't remember which Bronte for a second. She only wrote the one.
Those Brontes.
Yeah, Emily Bronte only wrote one book, so I should remember it. So, yeah, you said Wuthering Heights. I would say that any adaptations that get, made into a movie or a TV show or something like that are probably going to appeal to people, because they're like, I really enjoyed this. I'm interested in what the source material might be. And especially with like The Handmaid's Tale, there's of course that TV show that has almost nothing to do with the actual book. I've only watched a few episodes, and I get where they wanted more action to appeal to a broader audience, but The Handmaid's Tale to me is such a quiet novel, and I think that's where it should have remained, but I get it. Anyway, what do you think about that list?
I love that list. And Joey, I think it goes to credit my age that I'm thinking The Handmaid's Tale is not a classic yet. Like, I'm thinking 100-year-old classics, because I was reading Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, so it's over 200, almost 250 years old. And so for me, not 250, 200 years old, that of course Margaret Atwood is appealing to people. When you said 1984 Brave New World, did you have that on there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for me, those are dystopian themes. They're trying to figure out what is the world coming to. And I think if you grow up in a generation younger than me, probably younger than you, and they're like, what is Orwellian? What do they mean by these terms? What do they mean by Big Brother? Is that a TV show? I'm like, there was something before the TV show. So you might want to just circle back to the source material. And so I am excited that people are learning about things that perhaps you and I and people of older generations instinctively know, because we've been exposed to them in real time. And so that gives me a lot of hope for the future, that people are interested in learning from these really interesting and in some ways prophetic of where we ended up and our current political environment. So I just think that's also really interesting.
What if this were to happen? Because Margaret Atwood, whether she's a prophet or not, or I'm sure that she saw the signs of like, okay, these things are happening and have happened, but what happens if I take it to the extreme? What does that look like? So I think people are more interested because of the show, but I think also because of the current political climate of like, this is a reality that some people would actually enjoy.
What's interesting about Margaret Atwood, and you bringing this up, I think she started writing this book in the 80s, and she was seeing some cultural things pulling together that she's like, this is a little disturbing. And that I heard an interview with her that after the show that we are not referencing, the Handmaid's Tale series, she received so much interest and revived energy about this story that I'm going to say, the public demanded Margaret Atwood write the testaments, the second bit of the story. And I just thought that was also such an interesting way for an author to say, I wrote this at a specific time and place for a specific reason. And now, 20 years later, 30 years later, there's something even broader that I can bring out to finish the next level of this story. And so I really appreciated that. So it feels to me like a younger modern audience is clamoring for this type of material, and authors who can create it, they're like, yeah, we can give you something serious. We can give you something meaty to sink your teeth into.
Yeah, I think the commonality between all of these books that I have sort of seen is that they're discussing social issues in a way that is, I think, very enlightening to younger generations who are starting to contemplate all of these big ideas, like in The Handmaid's Tale, or in 1984, as you said, with Big Brother and thought crimes and stuff like that. I mean, that is something that has literally come up recently in the United States, is basically thought crimes. They're naming it something else. They're calling it pre-crime. And so I think that's really interesting. And one of the others that were on the list, that I didn't list all of them, but was The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. And there were some notes about that. This is interesting to younger generations who grew up with influencer culture, because Dorian Gray, of course, that's basically what that was about. If you were to modernize it, it would be about an influencer who's famous for the sake of being famous and being just beautiful.
And being good looking. And Joey, I'm laughing. It was like they didn't have a word for influencer, but they did have Dorian Gray. So I can definitely see the appeal to that and the downside, right? Because Dorian Gray is not a happy-go-lucky story in the end.
I think that's interesting that a lot of people are gravitating towards things that they are trying to figure out, what is the world about? How do I navigate this space? And how do I understand the complexity and the nuance of that? And I don't know about all of them, though. I think like East of Eden by John Steinbeck, that is more about like Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel. So I don't know that there's that sort of like, what if that were to happen? I think I have mixed feelings about East of Eden, but I think the consensus on social media is that like, this is an amazing. Now, I'm not saying it's not an amazing novel. I think people think like this is like pinnacle writing, or at least pinnacle American writing.
Joey, I appreciate that, because my father loved East of Eden by John Steinbeck, and I had never read it. So maybe I can catch this trend and catch up on some things that I have missed. And Joey, I was with a group of readers. We had 36 people together on a full day discussion of some really nice literature. And when they ask, what do you do? What's your podcast about? I say, we talk about literature and short stories and social issues. So it was just interesting for you to say, what are young people reading these days? Well, they're reading in literature because they want to figure out how the world works and their part in it. And I'm like, yeah, and so do old people. So everybody can get on board with this trend, because everyone can benefit from that. And Joy, I'll just say one thing about the demographics of the group that I was with. They were some were in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and the oldest person that I know that was there actively speaking was 85 years old. And I said, wow, that's really quite impressive. And then one lady raised her hand and she's like, yes, our Great Books leader is actually 105. And I was like, that's amazing. And the whole reason I'm bringing this conversational thread in, Joey, is that the vibrancy of conversation, the commonality with other people across age ranges, if you can pick up a book and everyone is focusing their attention on closely reading and discussing a book, all of these social barriers are broken down in some way, right? You can be authentically yourself and say, how does this relate to me? But you can also hear other people's perspectives in situations that you may not have ever considered. So I'm just really excited that the data backs the fact that we are on to something that people actually are engaging in.
Yeah, I think saying that this is intergenerational, these types of books, is a good point, because I think each generation, other than just wanting to try to understand the world around them, and have greater context for that. I think that's why so many books end up getting banned as much as they possibly can. Obviously, in like a school library, that's where they would ban them, is because reading is a dangerous tool for, governments because you can't control smart people as easily. If you're reading 1984 or Animal Farm, if we're talking about Orwell, you could read those books and then be like, huh, that's a little suspicious, government. Whatever government, it could be the United States, it could be anywhere. It'd be like, I'm kind of recognizing a pattern that I've read in George Orwell, and I can see where you're now headed. And so now I have the ability, or have the education to say, like, to question it and then to find what could a possible solution be. And it could be for anything. It could be for The Handmaid's Tale. It could be for the Picture of Dorian Gray, and saying, like, what is the outcome? What's the end game of influencer culture? Like, why are they doing it? What's the point of all of this? I think just gets you to ask more questions and just be generally very curious about what's going on around you.
And Joey, so this group just read How the Irish Saved Civilization by Thomas Cahill, and that came out 30 years ago, right? So you were just a newborn little toddler.
I mean, I was a newborn.
Little Joey.
Yeah.
And what was interesting about this book is that it was before the rise of so much of our social media or AI or any of those things. And one of the points in the book, which was so beautifully demonstrated, is why did the Roman Empire fail? What were the conditions? And as they were listing off, it's like, well, there was, the concentration of wealth that too many people had to do without. There were a population explosion and people wanted what was there. There was a breakdown of law and order. They sort of lost the thread of, they were like, oh, we have all these high values in our Roman society. And near the end, they're kind of like, screw it. Like, we're just giving lip service to that. Like, nobody believes in this stuff anymore. And magically, their entire civilization crumbled and they were taken over by another horde of people. And as the people were reading, and I'm like, okay, this was written 30 years ago. They had no idea of what was coming down the pike for perhaps democracy, for Western culture, that there are a lot of parallels with the fall of the Roman Empire and this strife and turmoil. And as you said, there are conditions that repeat over time. And if you can look back and have some pattern recognition, as you said, Joey, you're like, I think I know how this story ends. How do we write a different ending to this story by taking action to make sure that we don't meet the same fate? So I just thought that was just such an interesting parallel and coincidence. And the more people were just speaking, and they obviously weren't speaking politically at all. And then we were like, this story sounds like it could have just been taken off the news headlines today.
Now, you said a little thing that is my catnip, okay, which is the Roman Empire, because it's a very interesting topic to talk about. What was the thing that, ended the Roman Empire? But anyway, that's not what this episode's about. Saying, like, I was like, oh my God, so many things I want to add to that, but we're not talking about that.
No.
But yes, I think literature and reading the classics 30 years ago, I guess it's a modern classic now. So I hope these types of books continue to circulate and younger people are continuously like interested in trying to these classic times 30 years ago to be like, what were people thinking about? Like, what was going on at that moment? And I think that's something that we explore a lot when we're discussing stories and literature in general, is we look at the historical context when we're reading older stories to say, like, what was influencing this person's writing, or what may have been influencing this person's writing, whether it was implicit, explicit, or unconsciously or not. So all interesting. So
all
keep reading.
Interesting. So can I just say one more thing about How the Irish Saved Civilization as a book? It was a catchy title, but the part that really made me want to go, I have to talk to Joey about this. This is going to be a great conversational piece. That they were talking about the scribes who were copying out all of these manuscripts. And in Ireland, because it was really isolated from Rome and other places, they didn't even bother to conquer them. They're like, no, we'll just leave them alone. Like, we don't need them. They had a culture of monks and scribes who devoured books. They could not get enough books. They're like, books are amazing now that we know how to read. We're not really writing a lot of our own books, but we'll get to that. But we can copy books. And the beautiful thing about that is that I was thinking, what's the difference between a scribe whose job is to take one manuscript and handwrite it out, right? That's his only job. Well, they find a lot of these manuscripts where the scribes got bored with just doing the job they were given. So sometimes they write like little poems or have little asides. And in some cases, they said they were acting as copywriters in the meantime. It's like, no, you're supposed to be a human Xerox machine. And instead, you decided to change some of the text. My whole point, Joey, if this has come down in a physical form, thousands of years, we have these old manuscripts, right? We have just beautiful old manuscripts. In the world of AI, in the world of every book that's ever been written can be scraped by the internet and can be, reconfigured and spit out as new material, right? That is a technology that exists. And it made me think, what makes literature literature? And for me, I was like, because a human did it. And I couldn't get past that, thinking about these scribes who, even though their job was to faithfully recreate, like it's a religious order, they're really following the rules, even they wanted to put their own human stamp on it. They didn't want to just leave it as it was. Joey, I don't know how you feel about, is literature that is written by AI and not a human being, does that have merit? What is that about?
What's that about?
What's that about?
Do I think that it's of merit? I think that what I love in books is that this is human ingenuity, that this is someone experienced something in their life and they thought about it and they put a lot of hard work and effort into it, and they put this out in the world and they were like, I just want to connect with other human beings, like who might not even be like them. And I always think of any great classic author, to tie this into what we were just talking about with the classics, anyone that's pre-AI, which is basically all of literature at this point. It's too new. There's not enough time. It's all basic. Name like any author. They probably didn't have access to AI. So for me, I don't think so, only because as you were saying, AI has to scrub and learn from written works. So if you're trying to create a book using AI, it has to steal from authors, whatever books it's been exposed to and has been fed in order to do that. So it's going to reconfigure all of these already created texts to spit out something that is different. But ultimately it has to steal it. And I think it's the same for all types of art and AI, like a visual art. It has to steal from an art style that has already been created and that it has exposure to.
Yeah, and Joy, thank you for saying that, because I loved when I asked you the question about what's this AI literature about? And you said, what I love about literature is that it is one human communicating their human experience to another person or a billion people, right? They just put it out there. Wherever it goes after they express it is not in their control. And I was hearkening back to the humanity of reading and connection. And if worst case scenario, 30 years from now, right? We jump into the future. It's 30 years from now. AI is writing literature based on things humans have written. But now that AI, that is not a person, is writing their own novels. So now novels are going to be created lacking some elements of humanity because they literally are not created by humans. And so it's like, at what point does that get so diluted that you ask someone 30 years from now, what is literature for? Or what is it about? It's like, it's an exercise for your eyes so you can get information. It's like, no, partly correct. It is a exploration of who you are, your place in the world, how you see others, how you have empathy. Like, there's just all of these things encompassed in great literature that you feel something. And since AIs cannot, to the best of my knowledge, because they are not real human beings, they don't have feelings. They don't make emotional judgments. They don't have empathy. They don't have true connection. And you'll be like, but what about the chat bot that tells me I'm doing a great job on my homework every day and
Yeah.
like keep it up? Like, yes, they can parrot, they can mimic, they know the right phrases to say, but there is something human that is missing. And so, Joey, that's the bandwagon I'm on, that it's like the celebration of I love technology, I use it in my work. It is important for me to be able to have some time saving. Let me look up a fact. Okay, that's great. But I'm not asking AI to write a poem to express my deepest feelings about my world experience.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that it's very popular right now. I mean, I don't know the person's name that is like I'm sure there's many people that are doing this at this point, but they were like producing over 200 books a year. And you're like, to what end? Like, other than money? Because it's like, okay, but like, I don't want to read an AI book, but I am like almost tempted to be like, what is the point? Like, I also don't want to support that. Like, it's a supply and demand kind of thing. So I cannot, demand this. Otherwise, it's going to still continue to be generated. But just out of curiosity, like, what is the point other than making money? Because it's not creative expression at that point. It can't be, because you're not a part of the process. You're just
You're
giving
not
prompts.
creating anything. Yeah, Joey,
Yeah.
I really appreciate that because I heard something on a podcast the other day and I don't recall which one. It wasn't this one that you're listening to right now. I can tell you that they were cracking down on creators who had made something ridiculous like 3,000 different types of podcasts. Like they're like, let me just like flood the market. I'll just come up with any topic and I will have an AI generated voice and I'll just have AI generated text and it will just be totally non-human. And I was so intrigued because I'm also like, okay, well, who's the maniacal brain behind that? Who's like, I'm going to have all the podcast on every single idea that you can come up with. I'm going to have a podcast about that. So I'm like, thanks. Nobody wants that. We would like something actually specific and real. And I would also just like to validate our humanness. It's like we reach out, we grab our books, we sit, we think, we talk, we cry on our podcast, we laugh at each other. I always forget who we're even talking about. Like there is just such a human element to discussion that I'm just so curious. And as you said, let's not feed the demand for what I'm going to call fake or altered content that is not based on humans by looking it up. I'm like, well, what are those podcasts like? Are they any good? And I was like, I don't know. If you knew that there wasn't honestly a person behind it, I'm not interested. Like it's the people that are interesting, not the creation.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know who their market is and like why so many other than to just like you said, flood the market. Like, what is the point of that? I don't understand the motivation behind that, but okay. Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to for me is like I want to read Companion Piece by Ali Smith. Okay, I read that not too long ago. Actually, you know what? Fuck that. I'm not going to read. I've already mentioned her a million times. I just read not too long ago People Like Us by Jason Mott. It was fantastic. Okay, first of all, if this book is not winning awards, then like people are stupid and they should be ashamed of themselves. But anyway, so I highly recommend it, obviously. But I want to read stuff like this, and that just so happens to be like semi autobiographical as well. So the human experience is 100% needed in this case. So a great example by me, really. I didn't even put that together for a second. But so that's the point that I want. I want to know what Jason Mott experienced or his idealized version of experiences or whatever. But I want it to come out of his head or any author's head. I just want to like be like, oh, I understand what this character was going through, or wow, I've never experienced that, and I can see that the author has either the author experienced it or knows someone that experiences or has researched it really well and knows what it or can think of what it might be like, whatever, fantasize, whatever. Tripping over my own fucking words. But yeah, it's the connection is that like what a special feeling to be able to read like Jane Austen or one of the Brontes, which I have up here. That 1700s, okay, or in a little bit later. And be able to open that and have that experience with these women who are long dead. Okay, they all died young, unfortunately, and be able to read their words and get a sense of what it was like to live at that time and what was important and like all of these things. And that's so special to me. And I don't want that to go away.
Joey, I love that because I also had a conversation with a random stranger, which I know is a surprise to you, that I was waiting in line somewhere and we were talking about his daughter who was a very avid reader. And I said, well, my podcast partner was talking to me about the importance of having characters that you can identify with because this man said to me, my daughter is a little bit unique and was feeling perhaps not part of her peer group in the way that she had wanted. And reading gives you so much exposure to so many different types of people and different thoughts that having access to say, right, I'm good. You know, I'm good because there's lots of other people out there who also are experiencing these thoughts and these feelings and situations or these questions. And it was just like very, very endearing for me to know that young people are seeking solace and understanding and companionship in books to live their lives in a way that works for them. And you, Joey, are an example of that for me because I said when my podcast partner was becoming a young man, he didn't see a lot of people representing the person that he was going to grow into be. So he was like, I see examples of what I'm not, and that's great, but what's the example of who I actually will become? And I thought that was just really, really sweet, Joey. So you were definitely on my mind there.
Well, that's good. That should be. No, that's a good point. Not about me. I mean, yes, I have said that, so that's accurate. I have said that. But I mean about AI because it cannot have those feelings. It doesn't have feelings, and it doesn't have creativity. So unless you're prompting it to say that, to do that anyway, because it's not possible for it to do that. So if you're not being mindful, then I guess then it wouldn't come out that way. Like, even if you're trying to say, write a book about the being queer and growing up queer, it's still not going to give you probably a good experience because it's not your personal experience. I don't want to read that. I want to read what happened to you or to characters that you can imagine what might have happened to them. But that's what I want.
Yeah. And as you said, if AI is writing it, it is stealing from other people who have had that experience. Right? AI doesn't have this experience. It's like, oh, tell me a story about this. I'm like, okay, well, let me just go read all the books in the world and get some ideas. I'm like, by get some ideas, you mean steal their work and like put it together as your own? Yes. Okay. I think that might be called plagiarism. And if someone else was doing that, if a high school student did that, I think they would get in a lot of trouble in my limited view of what plagiarism actually is in the current context. But it's just so interesting, Joey, that I just keep circling back to the, written by humans for humans. That's what literature is for. That is, I use the phrase as well, Joey, because we came to a conclusion when we were talking about our very fun times that we had in April talking about all of these interesting characteristics. And it's like, what were two things that we could settle on that every person has in common? Every human being has a human mother, one single human mother that gave birth to them, and we will all die, right? So everything else is a little bit of a wild card variable. Nobody has the exact same circumstances in their lives. And so thinking about AI, I'm like, you don't have either of those things. You weren't born and you're never going to end. So how do you have any sense of time or purpose or poignancy of, watching your kids grow up or your friends go off and, start new lives or any of those things? Like, they just don't have it. So please don't write me a story about something you literally will never, ever understand. You just can't understand it. You can read words, but again, I think we have like reading with your eyes is not the same as understanding with your brain and your heart. Those are like different functions.
Reading comprehension. That's an important skill that a lot of people lack, okay? I know that for a fact. Okay, yeah, I think, we're in agreement here. I think a lot of people agree. I don't know that I see a lot of stuff about like, yay, AI's writing books. Like, I don't really see. I think I've seen like maybe random comments on social media where people are like, yeah, I don't care if an AI wrote it. But then you're like, are you a bot? Because like, obviously that's a real thing on social media. as bots to, be the dissenting voice. But maybe some people who are out there, I don't know why you listen to this podcast, but if you do, I guess let us know why you read or would read something written by AI, because we're not reading things on this podcast that is written by AI. So I don't know why you would, if I guess you're open to both if you're listening and you're that person, if you're that type of person, but we will not be reading anything written by AI here. Our analyses come from our brains and they reflect our lived experiences, because usually we tie it back to be like, this is why I thought that. So yeah, let's just keep it up. But to go back to giving recommendations, what are some books? They don't have to be classics, don't necessarily, but it could be classics of people that really want to connect. What stories do you have that you think would fit that for people?
To really want to connect.
Just like books that made you feel like, I feel like most literature is a connection of some kind,
well,
anyway.
So Joey, it's hard for me to say that because I am so much a person who's always looking for connections that may or may not even be there. So I'm like, read this and it'll remind you of the time this happened. And people are like, okay, maybe not. One of the books that we read over the weekend was Small Things Like These from Claire Keegan, and this same group of people, some of them had read Foster in the fall, also by Claire Keegan. And her writing is so powerful because it is so human, 100% human. You get all the feels when you are reading her works, but she's not explicit about it. She just lets these scenes unfold, and you're watching people's lives and you're thinking about inequity and opportunity and love and companionship and all of the things. And they just open the door to all of these conversations. And so anything that Claire Keegan writes, I am happy to read. And it's amazing to me that in my mind, there's no ideal reader for her. It's everyone should read these books. Every age will be able to find something to pivot around. So Joey, do you have some books on connection that you will recommend that really get people talking? And before you answer that, I'm like, yes, every single book you've recommended to me has been to create a connection, right? Like you're like, I want you to read this book because it's interesting, but also I'm interested in what you thought was interesting in this book. And I just love that.
Yes, I think that's what I really love recommending things to people, is because I want to hear. I always say, like, let me know what you think. Like, even if you hate it, like, let me know why. I'm curious, because I don't care if you like it or not. It's not important. I just want to know how you felt about it. So that's a good point. But I think I wouldn't, and I will give specific recommendations, but I will say that if anyone goes to the library, which I love the library, okay, and I recently got a library card because there's not a library in my town, so I have to go somewhere else. But anyway, you don't need to know the logistics of that. I absolutely love this idea of like going into a library. First of all, I'm getting all this for free, and that's amazing, okay? And my library will tell me how much money I'm saving by not buying these books. Anyway, just go to your library. It's fine. I just love the experience of like collecting all these little books, or they're not little books, whatever size books, and I take them home and they're strangers to me. I have no idea what these are about, because I'm like, I'm not going to bother reading the synopsis. I'll read it a little bit, but like, I want to be surprised. Okay. And then by the time I return them, they're my new friend. I know exactly what's in this book. I have made this connection with this book and this author and these characters. And that feels like a very special experience that we can all have. Hopefully. Okay. As long as you have access to a library, hopefully everyone does. But anyway, I will give specific recommendations. I will say, Sula by Toni Morrison, I think is, first of all, Toni Morrison in general is a great recommendation. But Sula, I think, is one that's maybe not as recommended as much as like Beloved or The Bluest Eye. But Sula is really great, and I think it has there's a lot of connection that's going on in there that's both positive and negative, with the titular character Sula as well as being probably pretty negative connections. But I think it's curious. It's really interesting to see how all of these people in this very small town all connect and how their lives are so interwoven with each other. And I think, again, it gives you this sense of connection with this character, even if you're a, introvert who is a loner, okay, like me, hate leaving the house. I can get these connections with all of these characters, like Sula from with Toni Morrison. So that's a great one. I would say How to Be Both by Ali Smith. I read frequently recently, and that's a great one. I mean, all Ali Smith again. Root all of Ali Smith. Actually, in my local library that I go to, I was just like taking every Ali Smith that I could get, and now I have exhausted all of my options. They have no more Ali Smith that I haven't read now. And I'm like, that sucks. I really want to read more.
Joey, I was sure you were going to tell me that there now is like a little Joey dedication area, like, you know, where they like mark it off and there'll be like this part of the library is dedicated to our patron, Joey, who loves Ali Smith.
I do love Ali Smith. But anyway, How to Be Both is a great one. And it's like 2 books in one. You get a modern story and then a 15th century story. And it's great. And they're connected. Anyway, read Ali Smith in general. But yeah, I think those are my, I'll just give those 2 recommendations. And that's it.
I think that's great, Joey. I think that it's really exciting. And thank you for engaging in this conversation in real time, off the cuff, talking about the things that we love about literature. And so I really enjoy knowing a little bit more about what is driving your book choices and what appeals to you. And, you know, we've been doing this for 2 years, so I think we know each other fairly, but it's always that moment that I'm like, let's find something that we absolutely are just on opposite ends of the spectrum on and see if there's a middle ground that we can bring each other to. So like, I always do appreciate when we can be like, oh, this was awful. And you're like, oh, it's my favorite book ever. I'm like, oh, that. And I think one of the things that we try to do is like model for ourselves and each other and other people. We will always be able to reconnect after a disagreement about literature because it's not about who's right, who's wrong, whose opinion is the correct one. It is the ability to listen deeply to another person and try to figure out where they're coming from. And I really value that, Joey.
Yeah, I love when people are like, I hated that. And I'm like, I love that, or vice versa. I don't care. I'm just like, I like hearing what you have to say about it. I don't care. It doesn't make you a bad person because we didn't like the same book. I think that makes it a conversation more interesting because you're like, no, here's reasons why this is actually really good. And someone's doing the opposite of you. And you're just like, trying to convince the other person that like, no, you actually should hate this book. And you're like, that's not going to happen. I love it.
And I'm laughing, Joey, because as you know, I sometimes get very passionate about describing books to strangers, right? I'm to get really excited about it. And just as you were saying that, it's like, well, what happens? Somebody was like, I thought that book was ridiculous. I don't get the point. I don't like it. How far can you push that before you're sort of taking over or being too pushy? I guess that's a question for me. It's like, what's the right amount to passionately defend or explain? It's not even defend. Explain why you love a book. And somebody's like, yeah, I thought that was dumb. And then you're like, okay, then I'm going to need more words.
Yeah, you can't just say it's dumb. Yeah, that's not helpful. It's not a conversation. Yeah, I think, again, going back to connection, and I'm sure we'll wrap up in just a second here, but is that it also inspires connection between you and someone else, not just you and this book or this author. Because if you have people around you, if you're lucky enough to have other people who are reading around you, you can have that conversation and get to know each other even better because they're picking up things that you didn't notice or they liked it and now they're explaining to you why. And you're like, oh, I didn't even realize that you would think about this in that way. So just read and talk to people. That is the moral of the story.
I wholeheartedly agree, Joey. And so many memories in my life with meaningful connections with people have come from interactions around books and discussions and talking about topics that we talk about here. If anybody is curious about the things that we have read in the past, we have 123 episodes to go back. And one of the things that I'm excited about, Joey, is that so many of our stories are very short, easily accessible, classics. People can pick up on them, read the story themselves, and join into the conversation. So, yeah.
Plug. Yeah, plug ourselves.
Plug. Shameless
Whatever,
plug.
it's our fucking podcast. We do whatever we
That's
want.
what we do. I
Who
really
else are we
want
going to promote?
people to do it. Exactly. Well, Ali Smith.
Yeah, she doesn't need
Margaret Atwood.
it. Again, like, probably Ali Smith is not as well known as Margaret Atwood, but she should be because Ali Smith is amazing. And we both. Oh no, you had already read her, but I fell in love with Allie Smith through this podcast because that was the first time I ever read her. Was when we read Autumn, and I was like, "Who's this woman?" And she is so good, and I love everything about her, and I want to shake her hand.
And Joey's like, and give me all your books. Like, I'm ready to read all of your books. I'm just going to race through all of the books. And I'm very excited about that because my introduction to Ellie Smith was the book that you just mentioned, How to Be Both. So I was very intrigued by her. So all is well, Joey. So looking forward to the month of May, and I will see you then.
Thank you for listening or watching if you're watching us on YouTube. If you like today's episode, please make sure you comment, like, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And follow us on TikTok.
Yeah. And follow us on TikTok. Great. Thanks, Joy. See you later. Bye.